Morning, everyone, and thanks for joining day 2 of Yes. We had a lovely launch, and we're excited for another day of programming. My name is Rita Morais, and I'm the chair at the School of Design here at George Brown College. I'm excited to welcome all of you to today's panel discussing entitled Design in a Pandemic, How We Kept Learning, Working, and Designing. Now, before we begin, I would like to acknowledge that the land on which George Brown College is situated is the traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the New Credit First Nation and other Indigenous peoples who have lived on this land. Today, the meeting place of Toronto is still the home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, and we're grateful to have the opportunity to work in the community on this territory. Across the School of Design, we remain committed to identifying and removing systemic barriers to accessing college programs and services. And we're committed to working towards strategies, tools, and actions to better support our Indigenous student population. Designing, teaching, and learning is incredibly dynamic and interactive. Across the world, design schools have transitioned to alternative methods of delivering applied techniques and studio approaches to students. Today, I'm joined by some of the School of Design's very best, ranging from faculty members, alumni, and students who will share their experiences that have characterized the last year of their life, including challenges, barriers, and opportunities. I encourage the audience to ask any questions you may have via the chat, and we'll share them with our panelists. With that, I'd like to turn it over to our panelists to introduce themselves, beginning with Xavier Masse.
Good morning, folks, and welcome. My name is Xavier Masse. I'm the academic program coordinator for interaction design and interactive media management, and also a faculty that have been in industry of interactive media for about 30 years. All right, welcome on board.
Hello, my name is Nicole Dimson. I am the coordinator of the graphic design program at George Brown College. I'm also a faculty member, and I'm actually also an alumni. I graduated from the graphic design program back in 1986, when apples were things you ate and not things you worked on.
Hi, everyone. I'm Christine Doe. I am faculty, part of the graphic design program. I teach third-year students. I teach professional practice and thesis.
Hi there, my name is Michelle DeGrosier, and I am a faculty in the, actually 3 of the programs, interactive media, interaction design, and digital experience design. And I mostly teach production skills associated with managing design projects.
Hi, everyone. So happy to be here today. My name is Lee. I'm an alumni of the graphic design program, and I currently work at an agency called The Garden. So happy to be here and to talk about all of our experiences today.
Morning, everyone. My name is Gwen. I graduated from George Brown in the Interaction Design and Development program last year, and I'm currently working as a UI UX designer at Smooth Commerce.
Hi, everyone. My name is Rami Shok. I'm a graduate of the School of Design from the graphic design program. I graduated last year, and now I'm a junior designer at Zinc Agency.
Hi, everyone. I'm Yaz. I just finished my 2nd year of graphic design program, majoring in corporate design, and I'm really happy to be here.
Hi, my name is Thea. I am finishing up my year at Interdisciplinary Design Strategy program here at George Brown, and excited to talk to you about our experiences as well.
Thanks, everybody. I think it's time to get started with our panel. We're going to start by talking to faculty first. We'll then move on to talking to our current students, and then we'll finish off with our alumni before a larger discussion with everyone. So with that, I'm going to focus just on the faculty for now. All right. Oh, missing. Sorry, Christine, accidentally removed it. All right, so I'm going to ask you a couple questions just generally about the experiences over the last year. Some of them will probably blend into your design practice. Some of them will blend into your experiences within the classroom. Feel free to be as honest and as open as you can. And if there's any follow-up questions from the audience, I'll try my best to get those in as well. So feel free to add your questions into the comments on YouTube. So I'll start with Zab, and maybe we can just go around the room on this one. Zab, how did you prepare to teach online?
Well, thank God the school gave us a bit of time ahead of going online to prep a little bit. So, adapted some of the existing course outlines to integrate more collaborative software and online tools like Miro, so we can have an ongoing interaction with the students and live interaction with the students. And then quite frankly, also allowed myself to have some trial and errors and trying some little exercises and activities online and keeping track and notes of what would work and not work, and kept adapting the course accordingly. I'm sure along this morning we're going to talk about what worked and what didn't work. But yeah, I think to me it was like I took a bit of time to review the course outline, did a quick pass at it to see what I could integrate rapidly so we could start online rapidly, and then kept tweaking it as we were seeing if what worked and didn't work.
That's great. Same question to you, Nicole. How did you prepare to teach online?
Well, to start, it was absolute panic, to be honest. Total freak out, total panic, wondering how this was going to transfer over. I read every single article I could find about online teaching. I joined every webinar I could find about online teaching. I joined the online resource teaching that they had at George Brown College to really understand how this was going to translate, how this was going to work. And, you know, learned about all these new platforms to be able to do critiques, and tried to figure out how to work with engagement. And honestly, I would say it was probably about 2.5 months of a bit of freak out here and there, because it was a whole new beginning. I had been teaching for such a long time in class and tried to figure out how this was going to translate. I also teach first-year students. So with that as well, how do I get them to be engaged and connected and all these things that we know the importance of design as well. So there was a lot of that, a lot of sleepless nights. The first few weeks of school, I don't think I slept a night for about 3 weeks properly, just because it was so anxiety ridden trying to figure out everything that was going on. And after 3 weeks, it was lovely to have a sigh of relief. So I thought I would be prepared. But I felt prepared, but still very highly anxious for the first while.
Yeah, definitely a big change of pace and a big change of what we were used to. What about for you, Christine?
So I have the benefit of having third-year classes, so everyone already kind of knows each other, and I don't have maybe some of the pains that Nicole has, but I did like a bunch of tutorials. I did some like reading and like of articles and all that kind of stuff. But for me, it was actually less about the advanced preparement. Like obviously I reviewed my course outline, kind of revised some of the projects and some of the activities. But what I found worked for me best was actually engaging with the students and asking them, you know, is this working for you, or do we need to modify this, and just changing things on the fly. So adaptability throughout the semester was actually way more important than all the prep work going into it, because all that was basically, you know, in theory it's going to be great in my mind, but then once I was actually in the classroom with the students, it was like, okay, in-class activities aren't really working, there's not enough time, you know, let's scrap this, let's maybe, you know, modify this to make it simpler. Individual critiques weren't working, so let's revert back to group critiques, like just being able to just check in with them regularly and see how they were responding, and then just changing things just so that it was a little bit better for everyone.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And Michelle, for you, Michelle, you're teaching across multiple programs and different years within the program. So what was that like for you?
Yeah, I actually even teach at another school. I forgot to mention, I also teach project management at Loyalist College. So I was teaching at 2 different schools and 4 different programs. And I feel like I could put my answer together from what Zav, Nicole, and Christine just said. So I did a lot of the same things that they did. I lost a little bit of sleep, maybe not as much as you, Nicole, it sounds like. But I read everything that I could get my hands on. I did a lot of trial and error. And I asked for input from my students a lot. I actually even did surveys at one point to ask what was working for them and what was not. that. And that really helped me adjust what I was delivering, like really being adaptable and changing as I went. But I think I also came in with a bit of an advantage because up until very recently, I was working full time for a large agency and I was working with international teams. So I was already doing a lot of remote work, and I was even doing remote training sessions with people in like India and Argentina. So I was used to talking with people and coordinating with remote teams. And I bring that every time I'm teaching my students and working with them on these remote activities. I always emphasize, like, look, this is how this is similar to working with a remote team, which is really the future for a lot of us in the industry. So I found tying it to that professional experience made it easier for me. And I think it made it easier for the students as well to understand how what we're being forced to go through today, unfortunately, is actually going to be an advantage in the future.
I think that's a great point, and just sort of jumping off of some of the things that some of you have mentioned around surveys and this kind of thing. What did you learn about online learning throughout your process? We could start with you, Xav.
Well, yeah, I think there's a word that Christine said that's very true, which is adaptability, and I would say agility. I think everybody would agree that being able to react quickly to how the class is behaving, and I think there's no one size fits all happening. I think that what we're experiencing with one group could be totally different what you're experiencing with another group. The different town halls that you have organized, and Rita, and when we're having discussions with other faculty, proves the point that we're exchanging different practices, and it's you can see that something works with one group and won't work with maybe the year one students, whether it works better with the year three students. I just want to say that for the interaction design programs, we're at a bit of a better advantage because we're dealing with students who are fully embraced the technology. So, and we were already doing a bit of a hybrid before the pandemic hit. So our way to transition fully 100% to online was not as maybe as dramatic as the graphic design program. So Nicole, I didn't lose as much sleep maybe as you did. Now I'm losing a lot of sleep because after 400 days, more than 400 days of teaching nonstop, except for weekends, I'm at home surrounded by 4 screens, and I was saying earlier before we start the call that I'm starting to be allergic to screens, and I'm not actually. I'm pretty certain about that. So that's something we've got to watch out at some point. But new things discovered, yes. I mean, I think we discovered a whole bunch of different things. But for me, it's like not being afraid to try new activities and not being afraid to fail at them. And the one thing that I discovered with the students, just to finish, is they are very forgiving, especially online. They will, if you announce that, hey, we're going to try a new little activity, first time I'm doing it with you guys, I want to know if we'll do a little feedback at the end to see if it works or not work. And I find that this honesty and transparency is actually very well with the students.
Yeah, it was great. Does someone else want to jump in from there?
I would say that I would agree with Xav. The students were wonderful and they were very forgiving. They could see that at the beginning, because you're trying to work with the technology and trying to follow chats and do all this stuff, they were really wonderful. And I can remember one student said, don't worry, take your time, just breathe. Because you feel flubby in the classroom. You feel like you don't want to mess things up. And here you were flubbing all over the place at the first few classes. But it was great. I mean, I was so impressed by the end of the year or even the term of how well everything went, and realized that, by doing a stop, start, continue, something similar to what Michelle did, what's working, what isn't working, what do you like? And I did that relatively fast within about week 5, and I could hear from them what was working and what wasn't. And what I had discovered very quickly was that in my particular course of Typography 1, they hated breakout rooms, absolutely hated them. So I stopped it, and we immediately just started doing full class critiques on Miro, and they absolutely loved it because they wanted to hear critiques by everyone. I got them critiquing, learning how to be able to articulate how they felt about a piece in a proper, concise way, a constructive way. So there were some beautiful things that came out of it amidst all this stress, but I really did work with the students back and forth to find out what do you like, what don't you like, and getting the students involved to become moderators within the whole platform worked beautifully. Because when you shared your screen, you couldn't see anything. You couldn't see chats or what have you. And they really liked it. It almost made me think, do you remember when you were kids and who was able to clean the blackboards at the front of the class? It was that feeling sort of a pride a little bit to be able to be more involved in the class. And I would change it around from week to week. I would ask a different person. I would try to. And of course, there are always the handfuls that volunteer, but it was kind of nice to be able to just have that this incredible engagement in that way online. That would have been a little bit different in the classroom.
Yeah, I think that flexibility piece is really important, being able to adapt and say, okay, this didn't work this week. Next week, we're going to try something else. I think that was even more pertinent online. And I want to say that, we still have these students that wipe the whiteboards or the chalkboards, but now they're wiping down Miro boards and clearing all the data. So it's just a different approach. Christine or Michelle, anything from you on that one?
Yeah, I was going to say, I think a lot of the same thing. So adaptability. And a big thing that I learned was that there's no magic bullet. So I use a lot of different techniques for teaching. I pre-record some lectures. I deliver part of my class every week is live. I do a lot of interactive exercises in the class. And I do use breakout rooms all the time. I never had a problem with them. I find them really effective, especially if you want to get anyone to turn on their mics and their cameras. But it really is a lot more work to do all of these different things. So putting together a deck, videos, all of this. And I tried to limit the number of things that I was doing, but actually I found that there was someone who was absolutely dependent on one or the other of these different formats, right? So I thought, oh, maybe I don't need to do the pre-recorded videos. They don't seem to be getting that many views. And then I would stop doing them for a week or two and people would start asking me about them. So it really turns out that you need to deliver your content in a lot of different ways. And it is more work to set up. But I also found that this year, pandemic notwithstanding, that actually my students really exceeded expectations, and not just pandemic level expectations, like exceeded my expectations on any student being able to do a really quality assignments, quality work.
That's great. Thank you. Christine, anything from you on that one?
I would just sort of echo, I think, what everyone's been sort of saying. I felt that, yeah, students were really great in terms of, we're all figuring this out all together. So there kind of felt like there was this sense of like togetherness in being remote, but like we were all in it together. And so in many ways, I felt like there was greater empathy from everyone. Everyone was just so much more understanding. So that was something kind of really lovely. In a way, it was strange. It was nice. I felt like I really connected and bonded with my students in a different way. I felt that, in class, sometimes, class would end early and everyone just exits, they just leave. But now no one has anywhere to go. So so I felt like in a lot of ways, we'd spend a lot of time just chatting about design, but chatting about, also life and whatnot. So in many ways, it was sort of nice because it was a little bit more social in a very different way.
For sure. Yeah. Jumping off of some of what you folks had just mentioned, I wanted to ask about what sort of changes when we move the classroom and the studio environment to an online world. And it sort of ties well with the question that we have from the audience. Jasmine Salang is asking, so interesting seeing the faculty perspective of things. Is there anything you like more about online teaching over in-person teaching? So two-pronged question. The first half is what changes when you move everything online, good and bad? And then more so, what do you like about this format of online teaching over in-person? Anybody want to take a stab at it? Go ahead, Zeb.
Sure. One of the biggest change I encountered is that you have the feeling that you're always on. that you are always broadcasting. And it is also like online, there is this automatic relationship as you being the broadcaster, as we are right now, and then on the other line, on the other side, you are receiving information, and you try to break that as much as possible, because it's not about broadcasting. We're not just broadcasting. You want to engage people as much as possible. So I think for me that was the biggest challenge here, is what I couldn't do in class, which was this natural engagement. It's happening between prof and students, which almost turns the class into a studio more than a class. Was like, how do we try to emulate and replicate that online? So that was the biggest challenge. And then for things that I learned, for the second part of the question, was that I think that students really do like to see the on a class, let's say on a 3-hour class, students really do like to understand what the structure is going to be and where we at during that structure, and if there's any change that is happening, because you also have to allow a bit of the time schedule to change, or an activity that's switching from one to the other. But broadcasting this and then being able to say, hey, we are doing a little change, and you're doing almost like a live ticker, almost like a CP24 live ticker class, of saying, this is what's going on, this is what's coming next, and this is what we've done. I find that it's part of the learning process that worked really well for me.
Yeah, that's great. Anyone else want to jump in on that one? Oh, Nicole, I don't think we can hear you.
I'll go ahead while Nicole figures out her mic issues. So in terms of what changed, I mean, kind of everything and nothing. I really tried to transfer how I taught in person to an online format. And that meant I do a lot of interactive exercises when I'm in the classroom, getting people up and moving around and Post-its, and working in groups, and translating that to Miro ended up being the easiest thing for me for really a lot of the activities that I used to do. And in terms of what I prefer, well, I think actually Miro has been a bit of a game changer. I find that I'm able to develop activities that are more fun and engaging than activities that I used to do in person. So I see myself in the future integrating more Miro activities, sort of Miro games and things like that, that turned out to be a lot of fun and wouldn't really be possible if it was in person. The other thing I have to say I enjoyed about online teaching compared to in-person teaching was the lack of commuting. Although I did end up spending more than the time I saved on extra prep. So I guess it kind of...
yeah, you have different pain points probably.
Exactly.
Christine, anything on your end that you can talk about that you'd likely continue to do, or that kind of thing when we go back?
Well, so one of the things that I tried was carrying over the traditional format of thesis, which was basically after the initial first few weeks, we would just do one-on-one critiques. But then I found that students were ghosting me, they wouldn't show up, and it was just sort of like not really working for people, because everyone was so curious to see what everyone else was working on. So it was really hard to be in this like private little bubble. So I reverted back to doing kind of the breakout group kind of thing, and just having group critiques. And I encouraged everyone to sort of like hop in and sit in on other groups while I was meeting with them, just to see what everyone else's critique was, because you always learn from other people's feedback, even if you're designing something completely different. And some of them would sit through their like 6 hours of critique, like it's a 6-hour class, and they would hop through every single session to see what everyone was doing, what their feedback was. And it's like, it was actually kind of nice. But, it's sort of hard because you're trying to recreate that atmosphere online, and it doesn't quite totally translate, but it was kind of the closest we could get, because normally in class, I would meet with everyone individually, but they have the benefit of being able to just talk to each other and just sort of share their work while I'm meeting with someone else. So it was a little bit different, but in the end, it worked really well. I think that it's kind of still really hard to facilitate critiques digitally versus in person. Like, we don't have the benefit of being able to look at printouts. And I actually had a number of print projects in my section this year, and it was sort of unfortunate to sort of lose some of that. Something else that was sort of weird was that you know, everyone was very camera shy. So during the fall semester, no one turned on their camera. And I didn't see their faces until I had to do their mock interview. So I would do, as professional practice, we do kind of a fake job interview scenario where I meet with them one-on-one, and then they finally turned on their camera. And it was sort of weird because it was like I was going on 51 blind dates in a row, you know? So I was like, oh, that's what you look like. I don't know, you know? And so it was really bizarre. So it sort of feels weird because it's like, I think that the students don't realize, you know, I turn on my camera all the time. They can see everything. It would be really beneficial to humanize the experience and have them turn it on as well. You know, I think that they have to realize, like, if I turn off my camera and we're reviewing your work and all you hear is this voice saying like, oh, you should kern that type. And this just feels like a ghost haunting your file, right? Like, do this, it's really weird. So I think that the human factor kind of gets a little bit lost in translation. And so I think students just need to realize, turn on your camera. It will make things less uncomfortable for everyone. And I know you might feel more uncomfortable, but like in the reality is, you know, when you're often working, you're going to have to turn on your camera anyway. No one's going to hire you if they don't know who you are, right?
Yeah. No, it's a really good point. And this is something that a lot of people have talked about this year where they're like, I think it's going okay because 30 people are showing up, but I have never seen what any of them look like. So it's hard to say. But yeah, to anyone that's watching or the other two students that are on this panel, turn your camera on. It's nice to see a face. I gave a couple guest lectures this year on some of my work, and no one turned their camera on. And I was just like, what am I talking to? Who am I talking to? So it feels a little intimidating and scary. And as you can imagine, even on the other side, when you're pitching your thesis projects or whatever the case may be, people don't have their cameras on. It's really hard to connect. You know, when you see someone nod in an audience, that's something you're saying. It's reaffirming. So yeah, turn your cameras on. It's nice. I've been pulling up some of the comments that have been coming up on YouTube. We got a couple really good questions here. I'm going to pull one up that I think has been really pertinent this year and something that a lot of people, students, faculty, et cetera, are thinking about. The question comes from Ava, and it's, thank you for sharing. During such a time as a student, it was hard to feel sane the whole semester. How did you manage work and mental health simultaneously? Okay, good.
Lots of walks.
So lots of walks was
lots of walks. Getting out in nature. I had to leave this screen. I had to go away. I'm thankful I have a dog. He requires walking, but it's what kept me sane. Nature. Get out, breathe fresh air, get the sun on your face. Doesn't matter what the temperature is. Go for a walk and just breathe and be. And it literally has what saved me the entire semester. If I didn't have that, I would be in a very different state. That I know.
Yeah, definitely. I think that connection point, and I know it's one that, well, I mean, Michelle lives in the woods, and Zav is a big fan of the woods as well, so they'll probably agree with those as well.
Oh yeah, I just I went for a 4-hour hike on Sunday and ending on a beautiful lake. Absolutely crucial for my mental health, and it's one should be very honest that it can have an impact on your mental health. You are on all the time. That's the big thing about not only being a faculty but also a coordinator. You are on. You are, you know, Nicole. I don't have to. I'm sure you will agree that you are on all the time.
All the time.
And when we say we've been on for 400 and whatever days, we can accept it. It's not a joke. I mean, it's really true. And I think that we were talking to that earlier with some other faculty, that you don't have that moment to flush out when you, like commuting, for example. I mean, Michelle was joking about not being able to commute, but I'm sure that some days you would really enjoy that drive. You know, to flush things out and then think about something else, or maybe about work, but in a totally different way. And we don't have that. We on and off within minutes, and I think that stays with us for a long time. And we have to find ways to, as I say, flush this out for other ways, whether it's nature or whatever. So yeah.
Yeah, I think that setting healthy boundaries was something that I really watched a lot of people struggle with, and I definitely struggled with that as well. I think, going back to March of 2020, looking at like, there's so many things that need to be sorted out and everything. You have to keep tabs on everyone and all the students, and international students trying to fly home and faculty trying to figure out different software and things to use. And if you allowed yourself, you could work 20 straight hours. It was really detrimental. And I think, setting a healthy boundary that's like, I'm going to turn my computer off, at 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock or whatever time space works for you. And then recognizing that you're not going to revisit that desk space until the next day is really important. It's very hard to do. And I, to one of Christine's earlier points, for the first little while, it felt like there was nothing else to do anyway, so you might as well work. And I know for me, I kind of got into this like really big funk where I was doing everything from this exact box, right? And so my TV's over here, you can't see it. My couch is there. I would lay on my couch and watch TV. I would watch my emails come in. And I think it just kind of made me feel like I was always reachable, always on, and I wasn't connecting to the things that, kind of stabilized me. I don't know if anyone else was feeling like that, but there was this sort of like, also guilt-ridden feeling. You want to support the students, you want to make sure that everything was going well, but it's this like very true mental health mantra that if you don't take care of yourself, you can't really serve other people. So that was something that I think a lot of people really struggled with over the last year.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because you wanted to be there for the students. You knew they were going through their own. So I would just be available.
It's a little hard to hear you.
Earbuds, I've done everything I can.
Oh, okay, we can hear you now.
Oh, can you? Okay, I won't move from this spot. But it was more, you felt like you wanted to be there for the students. And I found that literally it was almost 24/7. And I had the phone in my bedroom, and I have a certain sound for George Brown emails. And even all night, it would be going on. Because the students were up freaking out. Now, I would not respond to them at 3 a.m, but it was really interesting trying to find that balance, because we're all, as teachers, we care about our students. We want to give them everything they need. But I found I gave them everything. You know what I mean? And I didn't mind it. I'm not complaining, believe me. But I did realize at one point, I can't turn on the computer this weekend. No matter what, I have to walk away from it. And I would feel badly if things were rough for the students, but I just thought, I can't. I have to walk away and read a book and not look at a screen. If I look at a screen another minute, I'm going to scream, kind of thing. And I'm sure the students felt bad. So
yeah, and I think that the being in nature kind of helps. I got into a practice for a while that I've stopped doing, but I'm going to start again next week around like deleting my email from my phone. So like I have to delete on the weekends, not impermanently, but I have to go and actually like make a practice of checking and checking in, which I think is really good and good advice for students as well. I wanted to spend the next 5 minutes that we have together talking about a couple things that there's some stuff in the chat, and just generally it's a question that I know a lot of people have been thinking about and talking about, which was, how did you build community in your class over the year? We recognized that it was very difficult to maintain sort of partnerships, to maintain sort of proximity to each other. So there are some questions that are being asked that are very similar. Kiefer's asked, for classes where students were in different time zones, how was the approach to accommodate for them? And then also David Hosang has asked, first year is where we find our first group of collaborators and friends. Has online changed that facet of school life? Are people feeling a disconnect? And I know not all of you teach in first year, but perhaps just commenting overall on the nature of community in online learning.
If you don't mind, I might go first, just because I do teach first year students. So that was a real issue for me. How am I going to get these students to be connected? Students being students started a Discord page the first day of class. So that was one way for them to be connected. Then we started learning about Feedback Fridays, and I would tell my students about Feedback Fridays and doing critiques and getting them to be connected. We got Diane Elric to start a game night for the students to get connected. We introduced the salon once again. So we were trying all sorts of practices for their community to be built from people who were all over the world, as well as our international students. And that question before, I had students that were in an opposite time zone in Korea. And I would ask them, what would you like? Because I made sure that every class I did was recorded. But it was really interesting to see for them, the importance was to be there in class with their other students. So they became nocturnal animals. They said, I'm up all night, I sleep during the day. And they were okay with that. It was their choice because I would say to them, you know, everything's tape, you can watch it. But it was so important for them to have some form of a connection with one another. It was really nice. And a lot of them were nervous. They didn't want to turn on their cameras. They didn't want to show each other because the fit wasn't right. You know, their hair wasn't done or whatever. But slowly things started to change. Humor started coming into the chat rooms. And we were able to see each other as people, even though we only teach to a green dot, basically. So you become like an actor for screen acting and whatnot. But it was really, and that was it. I mean, you can still talk. I'm still my Greek heritage. I still talk with my hands, even when I'm online. It's just still. So I think it kind of gave it a little bit of that bit, but it was a bit of a realism that came in. And that sense of trying to build community and trying to get them to get connected, but somewhat successful. Let's say that. I think it'd be very interesting to hear the first year students after an entire year of online, how they feel and if they do feel connected. But I could see that things were starting to come together for them. In an
I'm sure that a lot of them are going to have the same reaction Christine had with the 51 blind dates, where they meet each other. They're like, "Oh my God, this is what you look like? I had no idea."
Well, I did ask. Absolutely. And at the end of the year, I asked them, please, if you see me in the hall, can you come up and poke me? Because I don't know what you look like. I know your names, but I can't put the name of the face. Please come up and say, hey, I was your student. I'm so-and-so. Because I'd love to have that. I'm actually really excited and looking forward to that when we do get back in. It's like, oh my God, I can see you. I can see you're 5 foot whatever. I have no idea how tall you are. I have no idea about anything. But turning the cameras on was funny with the hair growth, just so you know. So the beginning of the term and then the end of the term, I wouldn't have recognized them anyhow because everyone's hair was like 4 inches longer.
I think it's it's not a bad idea. Maybe when we get back to Daniel's, we can give out those, hello, my name is badges. Write their name on and we can know, oh yeah, I had you last
Oh my God, I had you. Yeah,
not a bad idea. Sage is making a really good comment. We need to wear GBC apparel around Toronto and find other people again. It sounds like a really good game, a nice little scavenger hunt for design students, and a good opportunity to plug the in-store where there's 20% off merchandise this week. Okay. And yeah, Michelle or Christine, anything from you on that one?
I would just say that I always opened up my classroom a little bit early, and I would always kind of stay there and ask questions, you know, just to get to know them, just some like icebreakers. So like, you know, if you're stress eating, are you sweet or savory? Like, tell me your choice, you know, or just, you know, what's your pet peeve? Just different kind of things like that. And I'd always open up class usually with just sort of like sharing cool things, like random things, just sort of like, look, these cool, this cool art auction is just all these people who submit, they design a 7-inch single and it's all these vinyl records and they auction them off. Or check out these Dave Grohl amazing Hanukkah covers, you know, he's covering like Beastie Boys or whatever. So just always sort of sharing like whatever random things. Or when it was closer to Christmas time, I'd put on, you know, the little log fire on the screen while the students like filtered in. But something I also get to do that's amazing in professional practices, I bring in guest lecturers. So I invite some of my friends, and now that everything was online, I didn't really have to worry about geography. So I got one of my friends in New York to kind of join in, and because they have access to all their files and all that, he was able to share, you know, a personal project, because the students get the chance now to interact and ask people who are actually working in the industry all sorts of questions. And so some of them would be like, you know, what are you working on in your own personal time? And he'd pull up his claymation horse that he's working on, or, you know, what are you reading? And Alina would pull books from our bookcase and just be like, this is a really great book for design reference or whatever. It was really inspiring. And I always like to leave one slot open so that, you know, as part of professional practice, I get them to tell me, what are your top 5 dream jobs? Who do you want to work for? And I usually try to see who is the most, who are the most common kind of companies and people, and I usually just try to get one of them in to see, to give students the opportunity to actually have that chance to interact and ask them live questions and sort of forge those connections. So I'm trying to bridge that gap between not only them as students, because in third year they do have the benefit of knowing each other, but also trying to get them into the actual community itself.
That's great. Yeah. And Michelle, anything on that from you?
Yeah, I think I feel like in a way, a lot of the community building that happened was kind of just me getting out of the way and letting my group of students use their Discord group, use whatever platform they had chosen to connect to build those bonds. But I also found one of the most effective techniques that I did was forcing them to comment on each other's work. So I did a lot of Miro exercises, and I would be like, 5 points for doing whatever, and 5 points for commenting on at least 5 other people's work, giving constructive feedback. I had some, guidelines for how to do it. And the number of comments that actually came in was almost overwhelming. Like everyone did more than they needed to, and the comments were incredibly supportive and great advice. And really, I was really blown away. And I've since used that technique in all of my classes, regardless, because by sort of, especially because you're essentially asking them to support each other. And as soon as they start doing it, they want to. They're craving, just like we're craving, that personal contact and that being able to turn to your neighbor and be like, what is she talking about? Because you can't do that. There's no one to turn to in a virtual classroom like you can in a physical classroom. So doing the commenting and encouraging that, and also switching back and forth between using chat and voice and audio. I found a lot of people way more comfortable using chat, and that really helped as well, because people who weren't comfortable turning on their mic, turning on their camera, could still engage equally.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, we are at, oh, sorry, Zav, go ahead. I'll give you a last point. You're muted. 2021 proverb still. You're muted.
Let's add, I love the idea of broadcasting 15 minutes earlier. I would use my crazy eclectic Spotify and broadcast that, which would trigger some interesting reactions from the students, and then they start to know you a little bit better. That's as well. And I will also share some websites I would discover during the week. I would call it the website of the week. I discovered Drive and Listen, which you're inside a car and you're driving through a city that you choose in the world and listening to the radio station that the guy is listening to, the driver or wherever it is. It's called Drive and Listen. This is crazy. There's about like 50 cities in the world that you can drive through and take a drive. And along the way, there's also a website that gives you about 5,000 radio stations all over the world, and you spin the globe, click on one that you choose from anywhere, and then you get music from Cuba or Rio or Korea. So that was always fun to start the class this way and then build a bit of reaction and engagement before we go into the subject matter.
Yeah, and I think these sorts of practices, they start to inspire students to do the same thing. They might share it with someone else. Next week, they might say, hey, Zav, I have something I want to share. And so I think that opens up different potentials. So I think we can build community in lots of different ways. And of course, it looks very different than it would have looked in person. But regardless, there's still lots of synergies and opportunities there. Okay, I want to say thank you to the faculty for joining us on the panel. I'm going to bring you back in a little bit, but now it's time to talk to the users. The students. So I will bring them on screen and I will remove you. All right. Hello.
Hello.
Hope you're both doing well. I want to set the stage for the audience by letting them know that I picked two students that are in two programs that are very different. And oddly enough, you are working together right now on a project for the school. So this is a great synergy. Yasmin is a graphic design student, and in our graphic design program, there's a lot of studio classes. It is a 3-year advanced diploma, whereas Sea's program is a 1 year or less than 1 year, about 9 months program that's focused on collaboration and interdisciplinary design. design strategy. So they feel very different. The IDS program still has some studio environment components, but it's much more collaborative and you're working as a team as opposed to graphic design where you may have some teamwork, but generally you're working independently. So I wanted to start by asking you the same question that I asked the faculty, which was, how did you prepare for online learning?
I mean, I was really, but I didn't really prepare myself because it really happened very quickly. But I guess the thing that really helped with me to deal with online learning was to like actually be in the online environment and learn through the time. And for me, the main thing was managing my time and scheduling everything. And it really helped me to put up all the deadlines on my projects, sometimes even rest times just to watch something. Yeah, like putting everything in the schedule to be on top of everything was really helpful, because when we are at home, it's kind of different. Like, for example, me, I was always in school and doing all my projects, and then home was for me just to come and sleep. But then when everything was online, I have to do the same thing here. So the second thing that I did besides managing my time was to set up the whole new desk for myself and like clean up, put up a board, add sticky notes with my goals, and like, you know, try to make a different environment. And it did help me out. And the last thing that I really think was important was to know what time works for me better. Because, for example, I know that I'm a morning person, so I schedule all the projects, for example, like starting studying and learning in the early morning. So at nights I can sleep. But yeah, I think these are the main things that helped me out through this online learning.
Yeah, I think that preparing your workspace and differentiating between workspace and sleep space has been really important. That's great. Saya, what about you?
I think for me, when the sudden transition happened last March, there was not really enough time to process it. But for this semester, for this program, when I started again in fall, I actually had a lot of anxiety because I knew the program was collaborative. I registered for the program because I wanted to be able to work in a studio with a small group all the time. And I was always walking by in their classes on campus, seeing all the sticky notes, seeing them in the group. And I was like, oh, that looks so cool. Like, that's what I'm going to do. Go to the Makers Lab, do a bunch of cool stuff. But then I felt like that kind of experience was going to be all stripped away. And that was kind of really anxiety inducing. And I was never really a person to stay on the computer a lot. I don't really enjoy phone calls or video calls. I prefer in-person interactions a lot more. So with that, I actually reached out to my program coordinator. I was like, Naz, I don't think I could do this. I don't know if maybe I should defer. But, you know, with a simple phone call, she kind of convinced me. She's like, this is kind of the future. We have to be adaptive, and, you know, things are going to change anyway. So I stayed on. And I think what really helped me was during the summer, there was an online charrette that was held by George Brown College. And that was kind of looking at how can we build resiliency into online education. And I thought, well, you know what, if I can't change it, if I can't like change my situation, I might as well try to change the situation. And I think learning about what it means to do online learning as a student, but also from the point of view as a designer, how can we make it better, and seeing how challenging it is, kind of helped me accept the reality of it. And I think even participating in that online charrette helped me realize, oh, the meetings online, it's not so bad. It's not so different. I still was successful, and I still had good bonding time with my group mates in the cohort. And I think that kind of helped reduce the anxiety. So I think it's about it's practicing this online learning.
Yeah,
and I think it helped a lot.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Thinking a little bit about both of you both had experienced campus life. You'd both been on campus, Yaz for the first year of your program, Saya for a different program before, the Interdisciplinary Design Strategy program. Other than the obvious things like the commute, the physical infrastructure, what changed for you, and what sort of feels different in this space? And I'm thinking about, you know, practical examples like critiquing, being able to print your work, being able to you know, reach over to someone and say, hey, can you have a look at this for me? What sort of feels different for you?
I think aside from losing the joy of printing and learning from the production part of design, I would say for me it was the lack of inspiration and motivation the most. I used to do all my projects at school and everybody was working at the same time, so you can just like learn from everyone. And you know, if you kind of get motivated when you see everyone working and you feel comfortable as a designer working next to other designers. And about having inspiration, like we always had design critiques, feedbacks in the class, and our professors were giving feedback and we could listen to theirs and learn from their other people's feedback. So I think we kind of lose that in a sense as well, and we could look at everyone's work and get inspired and bring this creativity back to us. And also, you know, when you go to the school environment, everywhere, all around the school is full of amazing work of all the designers that are there. Like you can look at the previous work of everyone, and it was just, yeah, really inspiring and boost the creativity for me. But the last one was learning from each other. And, you know, if you had any question, you can just like go ask someone that's sitting next to you, because everyone kind of is in the same field. So you get, hey, can you help me with this? And they literally just show you how to do it, and you get connections and also learn from something from each other. And I think, yeah, kind of miss that a little bit.
Yeah, that connection piece between, you know, you have the connection between the faculty member and the connection between the content, but that sometimes that connection between each other is a little bit lacking in the online space. What about for you, Saya?
I think similarly for me was the isolation, because I think I'm very extroverted, so I really do appreciate being around people. And I find that being around people on the screen is definitely not the same. It's more draining for me. And I think a lot of the difficulties with online is that the interactions don't really happen organically. If I do want to connect with my professors, if I do want to connect with my cohort, it's another meeting that we have to set up and schedule and then attend. So then, you know, that kind of gives us excuse to do it less and less. And I think in that way, we don't really get to have that connection that we otherwise would have on campus. And I think what Yas was saying, it was great. And even if I was working on my project in the library and seeing all the other students struggling during exam time, you know, you get that kind of synergy, and you get to have kind of valid, like you feel valid in your struggles. But whereas here you're isolated, you're in your home. I have no idea what the other students are up to. I don't know how they're dealing with the situations or what their strategies are. So it's kind of, yeah, it was really isolating at times.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point. And I think that, you know, everyone sort of experiences things differently in different times. And, you know, I found for me, like the winter was really hard. The lack of sunlight really impacted me. I feel like it sort of changed how I was motivated and how I wanted to work and how much time I wanted to work for. So there's always different variables that will impact. I'm going to go to the audience because we have a bunch of questions for you folks. The first comes from Christy Jones. How do you find that this online format and working from home affected your design style?
I think for me was mainly I needed to figure out my own style by myself. Like before, I was used to see other people's work and get ideas, but now I had to like think more. And yeah, I think this is such an interesting question.
I mean, maybe it didn't affect or impact, but it probably changed a little bit of how you worked. Maybe you changed your process or something like that.
It definitely changed the process. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Anything from you on that one, Saya?
I think for me as well, the process, it's just, I mean, as isolating as it is, it did give me a whole lot more time to do my designs. And I think I was more engaged with my projects as I otherwise would have with the distractions in school, in person, going out to eat, all that kind of stuff that was then stripped, and I'm focusing on my projects. And I think in that way, my design was enhanced and I was kind of rigorous with my design practices.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. We have another question from Kiefer, which is, how have you managed communicating and collaborating with other classmates if you've had group projects? Saya's most of the year has been a group project, so she could probably shed some light and give everyone some recommendations and tips. And Yaz, I'm sure you had some group projects as well, but maybe we'll start with Saya on this one, so that's been the bulk of your work this year.
Yeah, so the nature of my 9-month program is basically all group projects. And I think we've kind of reached a point where we are able to work really well with each other, but it took months. It took a lot of time and practice. And I think the key was for us to have clear boundaries with ourselves, our work, and clear communication with each other. So sometimes we'd be in meetings and not always we would have our cameras on. And I think for us to kind of also accept that that's okay, that, not to be offended with when somebody has their cameras off, or to clearly communicate, hey, I feel like this is not going the right direction. How can we do it better? But then being online, that could come off or things can sound different than originally intended. So I think kind of getting to know each other and having time to understand. And I think it comes with empathy. I think the online environment kind of really brings out the empathy in people. And I think in terms of communication, you just have to be as clear, direct, and kind as you can with each other. And I think that was kind of the key to our success in the program. Although, yeah, it's very difficult. I think you have to kind of have set rules.
Yeah. I think it goes back to what I was saying earlier around the, it's different for everybody and it's different different days and different times. And sometimes you feel overwhelmed. I think this is also like a really good sort of reminder to talk about, the structure of programs, the nature of programs, and how we sort of engage with each other. What about for you, Yaz?
I think Saya said it all, because it's really important at this point. For us, really, we had a couple of group projects and we used to use Collaborate or Teams or Google Meets. But what works better for us was that creating a different document, instead of the brief that we had a separate document as well, having our own schedules and what are the things that we got from this meeting, and writing everything down was really helpful, because I even used to forget when's the meeting, and I had to go and see all the notes from our meetings. And it was a little bit difficult for sure to communicate with others that you haven't seen. And, some people are shy. You want them to talk, but they don't. And you want them to participate in the group projects. You don't want to do everything yourself, because it's a teamwork. But yeah, definitely it's more about being able to connect with them and getting to know them better.
Yeah, that's true. I think also, sorry, go ahead, Sam.
Sorry, I just thought that if verbal communication is not as effective, I think online was also a great space for us to upload our drawings really quickly, or sketches, or have images that kind of speak to what our idea is. And I think that also kind of helps facilitate conversations in multiple modes that might be accessible to more people.
For sure. I think this concept around empathy that you mentioned as well is really important. I mean, if you ask me what one of the most important traits a designer needs to have, it's curiosity and empathy. And I think that, empathy for the human condition, empathy for each other, empathy for the client sometimes, which I know sounds wild, but I do think that empathy is a really, really important lesson for everybody. We have another question from the audience. What are the difficulties when you start learning online, and how can you manage it? So this is a really good question for students that are perhaps going to be learning online this summer, or might have semesters where they're continuing to learn online. So can you talk a little bit about what some of the difficulties were for you that you haven't yet highlighted, and then how you manage them accordingly?
Yeah, go ahead if you want.
I think one of the things for us students, I know the faculty also talked about this, was setting the boundaries, right? Because I think work bleeds into school and school bleeds into life. When I'm sitting at this computer in this spot, like Rita was talking about, and I think then what Yaz mentioned, to have that plan, to have that structure for yourself in saying, no, my time ends here. I'm going to return to the work next day. And I think in that way, it becomes a routine, and it's not just bleeding into every aspect of your life. And I think in that way, it still might, because we're always then attached to our phones, if not our computers. And I'm finding myself on walks, checking my emails, checking my group conversations. And I think that's unhealthy. And I think then we have to really kind of hone down on what what our personal mental health strategies are. I think then to kind of abide by it, even when things get rough.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. There's a couple of comments in the chat just generally about sleep hygiene, separating work and sleep, setting some healthy boundaries, etc. Some comments about printing as well, and people having a lot more money in their wallet because they don't have to print things. So, you know, goods and bads, obviously. You've both touched a little bit on this, but I'd asked the faculty how they build community in their classrooms this year, and I'm curious to see how you've built community either inside the classroom or outside the classroom with your peers.
Well, for me, actually, Nicole mentioned it. We had this little community of the salon. We had every week a call to just like talk about our experiences and say what we're dealing with. We had a monthly call actually, and we reached out to Nicole with a couple of my fellow designers and friends, and we said, well, the way that worked for us was when we were in school, like I know this third-year students, I know the graduates, and it was only because I was in school and I could see them. But now we don't have that, and how can we know this first-year students? And we reached out to Nicole, and she gave their connections, and we had a meeting with them, and it was so amazing that actually 20 people joined that call, and they had all their videos on. So it was really nice to connect with all of them and see how everyone is doing. And the other thing was Feedback Fridays, and we used to just have a call and Fridays and give feedback as designers, give feedback to each other and kind of build a deeper level of connection. I think when we were in school, we're just like friends and, you know, designers, but then we had this calls and we just get to know each other in a deeper level. So I think that really worked for me.
And were you showing work like that was school projects? Was it personal projects, both, or?
Well, some of them were graduates, but they were our alumni, for example, or they were in the third years. But yeah, the ones that it was student work, mostly it was all school projects. Yeah.
Nice. Very good. And what about for you, Saya?
And I think for me, that deeper connection, that's really true, because I think as collaborative as our work is, and we're sometimes sitting in like 6 to 10 hour meetings with my cohort, and we would think that, 10 hours of speaking to each other every day, 5 days a week, you would have some sort of community built. But I think it's different. You have to make separate time for socialization and versus work, because when we're in work meetings all the time, it's not a connection that we're building. We're building ideas, we're building projects. And I think the kind of community piece came in when we started allotting time, maybe 5-10 minutes prior to a meeting or sometime after the meetings, to actually then talk about our personal life, what we like, who are we as a person outside of this chat box. And I think in that way, the connection that I made with the cohort, on some levels, it is deeper than I think it otherwise would have if we were just acquaintances, or I just saw people in a bigger classroom in person, because you have to consciously make time to build that connection, which I think is a difficulty and a challenge, but also a pro in a lot of ways. That
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And I think also, setting that time aside to like have conversations about the day-to-day is really meaningful. I know that's something that for me feels really different this year, is like you don't have these happy accidents, or you don't see someone in the hall who's like, hey, I went to see this show this weekend, you should check it out, like you'd really like it. And then maybe that inspires another piece of your work or how you think. So definitely that sort of like opportunity to engage is missing in a lot of different ways. I wanted to ask you one more question, which was, what are some of the aspects of online learning that you feel would be beneficial to continue when we're allowed back on campus?
I mean, the best part of online learning was not to commute and get ready in early morning classes. But to be honest, one thing that actually helped me, and I don't know if it will be possible in the on-campus classes, was I had the recordings. And for example, if the profs were giving me feedback while they were recording it, so I could get back to it and write the notes better, or even in the lectures. So I don't know if that is possible, but I had the recordings, which was really great. Yeah.
Nice. And that critique structure in the past was like, I know some instructors, they pin the work up and you kind of walk around as a group and you do the critiques that way. Was that something that, same thing, like everyone can see your critiques, obviously?
Yes. Yeah. We could all access everything. So
that's great. Okay, very good. And anything from you on that one, Saya?
I think as challenging as online learning and interactions are, it is super convenient. And yes, not only like the commute time, the outfits, anything like out the door of Morais, but then I think if it was optional to take some classes online or some days online, or even office hours were held online optionally, then I think it would be beneficial. So to encourage people to attend more classes, even if they're not, feeling like trekking downtown for an hour and a half. But I think in that way, if we could have a mix of offline and offline format of school, I think that would be really beneficial for the students to give choices for those who might be more comfortable online versus offline.
I think a lot of
sorry.
Go ahead. No,
I wanted to add something really small. And I think when we were in school, it wasn't really often that we had our group meetings. Like if we had something that we need to do as a team, we always say, okay, let's meet up this place. And it was really hard for everyone to kind of like get there. Some people lived far, so they needed to go there. But now with this online environment, we kind of learned that, we can actually have our meetings online and it had the same impact. It's not going to be hard. We don't need to go to that space. You can just have it online, and I think that is really good as well.
Yeah, I think once you kind of figure out that structure of how to work together and that makes things a little bit easier. It's always a little bit awkward at the beginning, but you find your way along the way, so that's great. I wanted to say thank you to both of you for sharing and being so candid about your experience over the last year. I think it's very beneficial for everyone to hear, including the faculty and your peers. So I want to say thank you. I will bring you back shortly. And now I am going to bring on our alumni. So here's a group of graduates from 2020, or a series of troublemakers. Many of them, actually two of them, I don't know if Remy was involved in this, but before the school closure, they gift wrapped my entire office for Christmas, everything down to the pens and the stapler to the monitor. So it's a wonder that any of them graduated at this point. But in any case, I'm glad to welcome them here. I think a good place to sort of start here is talking a little bit about what the last year has been like for you. You graduated in May, I guess May, June, and then what transpired from that space until now. So where are you working? And then we'll talk a little bit about that journey to finding work. Why don't we start with you, Lee?
Yeah, so I was lucky and I was still working at the in-store when I graduated. And so I was working on the impact report again with the in-store. And then while that was happening, I knew that I had to think about my next step and where I was going. And I was actually very lucky and very fortunate, just scrolling on Instagram one day. And I saw that this agency was having an internship during the pandemic. And so I was like, let's go for it. Let's see what happens. And managed to land the internship. And then from there was offered a contract position, and then now I'm full-time. And so really lucky to be where I am today, working for a small independent advertising agency called The Garden. Really awesome, really great. But also in January, because I was still contract with them, I didn't know what was going on, if my contract was going to be extended in January. Contracts are very stressful. So I decided to hand out a bunch of resumes and did a bunch of portfolio reviews with a bunch of people and just trying to do that as well. So it's very weird doing it in the digital world rather than what we were preparing for in professional practice with Christine and what the world would be like, and try and figuring out on your own and pivoting. But yeah, it's very possible to switch. I mean, I don't think much has really changed. I think boundaries are now down a little bit more and people are more open to having portfolio reviews whenever. So reaching out and making those connections, I think, is very crucial to finding a job now.
Yeah. That's great, Lee. I'm going to go over to Remy. Remy, same question. What's the last sort of year looked like for you? Where are you working now?
So I was also fortunate enough to continue working at the in-store for a little bit after I graduated, which gave me some time to start looking while still having a job. It took me a while. It took me about 6 months to find something. And since then, I've started a second job. So I've had a little bit of experience doing interviews and applying to stuff, which we're going to be talking about more. And right now I'm working at Zinc Agency. It's been a couple of weeks only, so I can answer any questions that come up about like interviews or applying.
Thank you. We'll go over to Gwen. What's the last year sort of look like for you?
Yeah, definitely different, but also in some ways the same. I was fortunate that January of last year, I started with Smooth Commerce on an internship opportunity through George Brown. So I was internship with them, and then kind of the pandemic hit, and it was about a week before everything started and everyone went from home that I was brought on like full-time contract with them. So the timing of that, 2 months into it, I really reflected on of like, wow, that was impeccable timing. So still working for the same place, it all transitions to online. And then obviously the past year has been mostly working in, a 600 square foot apartment in Toronto, trying to figure out how to, set boundaries the same as everyone else and, not feel totally off the rails every day. But yeah, in terms of work, there was a lot of changes that happened there, but the transition in general was relatively smooth, I think, because I was working in the office with them before. So that transition, I think, was a little bit smoother from my experience. At least I already knew people and I had seen them in person and I had those relationships built a little bit. But yeah, otherwise just general, pandemic woes like everyone else.
Yeah. Okay, some good honesty here. So Gwen, I know that you had sort of you'd started to work with them in January, so obviously a different perspective here. But for Lee and Remy, you were both onboarded in the middle of a pandemic. What was that like for you?
You go first, Remy.
Okay, so for me, yeah, I was only onboarded during the pandemic, so I didn't know what people regularly go through. But for me, it went very well. I never really had any problems or issues thinking this would have been better if we were in the office or anything like that. So I feel like it went very smoothly, and I've done it a couple of times, and it went smoothly in both times. One thing that I noticed is that working from home, especially onboarding first day, first week, it takes a lot of the pressure off and a lot of the stress off. Because once you turn off that camera, you're back home on your own, and you can just breathe and take the time you need. And that was definitely something good because I'm the type of person who gets stressed out, being with new people, on a new team, doing a lot of new things at once. So that was a good part, at least.
That's great.
Yeah, I think like Remy, my onboarding process with the Garden was pretty simple. The agency usually starts the week with a status where everybody is there. It's like Brady Bunch style, and you just talk and like, this is what's going on in the agency this week. These are the projects, and then if there's any new faces, they'll introduce you. You'll do a couple icebreakers. So that was basically the onboarding process. The team that I work with is the design team, so there's really only the design director and the senior designer, and then I on the team. And so separately, we would have like our own onboarding process where she would walk me through like what's going on, what projects are happening, and what I would be kind of like taking on my plate. And if I had any questions, I could always go to her. And then that first week that I started, I had a bunch of like working sessions with the design director and with my senior designer where we would just have our Google Meet up on like our just chatting, and it's a way that we all formed like our bond, even though we're all digital. We still have like working sessions where we'll just sit there and we'll just chat about life or what's going on, and we can bounce ideas off of each other. So that was how onboarding worked for us, and I think that it worked really, really great. And even though I haven't met a bunch of the people in the office, I still feel like I'm connected to the culture of the agency and to a bunch of the people in the agency as well. So It's really possible and it's great, but it's really weird not going into an office for like that first day where you're just like, hey, I'm going to log on to this link. But you kind of disappear into like 20 people that you don't know. But it takes time. It definitely takes, I feel like it takes a lot more time to get kind of into the fold than it would if you were going into the office and seeing people face to face to have like those little coffee chats. But yeah, each agency has kind of developed their own way to onboard digitally for sure.
Yeah. Very good point. I think it kind of goes back to what Saya and Yaz were saying in the last chat around like you don't get to know people in the same way, you know, like often when you have people and you're, you know, walking into the office, you go get a coffee, someone tells you a story about something that happened with them and their partner on the weekend or their kid or what they did or what movie they saw. And so it feels a little bit different. It's a bit more awkward to do that in a group meeting setting. So there's definitely some differences there. Gwen, you had already been working. So what was that sort of shift from going into an office every day or going into an office on a weekly basis and then switching gears and going online?
Yeah, it was definitely interesting. I actually, because I was rounding out the internship, like the timing was very blended and kind of odd. The day that the office actually decided to go, like, you know, today's the day we're going remote, and everyone walked out with their computers, I actually wasn't there. So then I had the struggle of coordinating, you know, all, you know, through a phone and whatever to try to get, you know, my equipment to me so that we could work from home. The good thing about our company is every single role is fully able to be remote. So the transition in general was actually quite seamless in that way. Like, it's not like we have any department that, you know, oh, they really need these physical machines that are only in the office. Everyone basically can do their job from their laptop. So that was good. I think the initial transition was, I think the initial idea, and we've, you know, adapted so much over the last year, but initially it was, okay, let's try to, like, for the most part, fully simulate kind of all of our in-person time. So there was like so many meetings scheduled throughout the day in the beginning. So it was like every single morning you had, you know, stand up where you met with your team and talked about what you were going to do that day. Then it was like, you know, right after lunch, another stand up. Let's all talk about what we're doing again, you know? And then in between all that was all your individual project meetings. Like, okay, we have to do a design review for this. And then I'm over here talking to sales and marketing about this. And so it was just so many meetings at first.
When were you doing actual work if you had all those meetings?
So this is what we eventually had to iterate on everyone in the company, you know, quite quickly. Like within a month was like, okay, like there's too many meetings. Like, you know, you really quickly had to differentiate what is worth a chat message, like what can just be done over a chat message, and what actually warrants a meeting. Because the second you get a call, you know, it's always minimum an hour. Like people always have things to say and discussion happens, right? So yeah, so the transition was interesting. It was a lot of figuring that out. And like I think Michelle had mentioned it in the beginning, but we don't have that ability anymore to turn to your left or your right and talk to your fellow designer or team member or whoever you're working with, right? So that was very weird. There was definitely a period in the beginning where, like, you know, now I'm just sitting alone in this room thinking like, okay, like, do I reach out? Like normally I would turn to the side and be like, hey, does this look good to you? And then you'd be moving along with your work really quickly. And then now we had to get to the point where we were making decisions. Am I shooting a chat message? Am I taking a screenshot? Am I getting on a call and actually presenting it? Like there was just a lot of figuring out in terms of communication, I think, that was ironed out over the first few months.
For sure. That's great. We have a comment from Dean Luigi Ferrara. So nice to see alumni coping and thriving in these pandemic times. Truly is a new time we're living in, with working for people remotely and joining companies and coworkers you have never met. Definitely a very good point there. So I have this image of everyone from Gwen's office walking out with their computers like a heist. And I also, when I went back to Daniel's to get my computer, I feel like every security or person I saw along the way, I was like, gonna work from home. I'm okay. I'm not trying to steal this episode.
Yeah, I'm stealing.
Yeah, it's like everyone's like automatically like, this is mine. Gary said I could take it. So I wanted to ask a little bit about the job search perspective. And again, I know this is So Gwen, you had already kind of been onboarded, but a good opportunity to ask all of you. We are working on a system internally to come up with a sort of job board for all of our students and alumni, creating a LinkedIn channel or a LinkedIn group so that all of the alumni can sort of share jobs, etc. We do have a question from Sage who asks, is there a site you recommend to look for jobs outside of Indeed or LinkedIn, sorry?
Yeah, the RGD job board is actually really great. I think you're able to join the RGD Slack channel as a student RGD, and they actually have a job channel in that Slack, and they post it quite frequently. I think there was 2 jobs that were posted today. So that is updated quite frequently. Other than that, other than LinkedIn and Indeed, I would say that's the best place to go, would be kind of like the RGD job board.
Cool. And I think they send out regular emails as well with their sort of like weekly recap. There's usually a little job posting there, and they have a job board on their website as well. I'm not sure if it's the same listings as on the Slack channel, but regardless, a good place to look as well. What about from you, Remy and Gwen?
Yeah, I definitely like the job postings they do on RGD. That's how I got that's how I learned about my most recent job. I would say the Zinc channel, sorry, that's where I work. The RGD than the website, because they kind of just post links every time they get one, than what they put on their website or what they send through their emails. So that's a good place to check out.
You cut out a little bit at the beginning. You're talking about the RGD website as well?
Yes, you asked about the difference between the Slack channel and the website, and I was just saying that they kind of give you more links that just like anything they find, they just put it in the Slack channel, while it's like less of that on the website and the emails that they send.
Okay, that makes sense. And what about from you, Gwen?
Yeah, to be honest, the George Brown co-op listings, January, 2020 was my job search. Like I said, I was thankful to land one from that. So I haven't really had to look over the last year. But the only kind of interactions that I've had along those lines would be through LinkedIn. We actually hired a new designer recently, and I was a part of the hiring process. So there was a lot of reach out through LinkedIn for that, which did go well, especially with me, and our HR manager responded to most of those. So that definitely works. And I think otherwise, yeah, just the general job boards was where our company had posted. So
that's great. Lots of in-house jobs as well. And I think a good opportunity is to, if you want to work somewhere specifically, go on their website, see what opportunities they may have. Bookmark those, favorite them. They might not have something today, but sometimes they have something next week. So it's not a bad idea to just keep persistent. I wanted to ask a little bit about some gaps. And so things you wish you knew, or things that you wish that college had prepared you for your first day on the job. And I think, Lee, to your point around, you taking this professional practice class, it was great to teach you how to work in, physically in a studio environment. I know that class looked quite different this year across all of our programs, just generally because we know most students are getting onboarded remotely right now. But are there some things that, sort of healthy tips you could give to us about how to better prepare grads for that nerve-wracking first day?
I can go first if you need a second. I was gonna mention, so a professional practice class was more about the job hunt, the resumes, the portfolios. I would think it's very beneficial if you can add parts about the structure of agencies and who you, as a junior designer, you will be working with, who you'll be reporting to. I basically started working and I didn't know what a project manager was. And it's like, it's the person that you work with most. And I had to learn that on the job. And I had to ask people, can you explain to me what your job is? So maybe a little bit more about the structures of design teams and how it works within a design team. And I feel like that would be a lot helpful for people preparing to join agencies.
For sure. I think, yeah, a bit of a landscape on what those roles are, who reports to them, how you might be able to work with them as well, I think is important. We also recognize that could be very different from agency to agency and studio to studio. So definitely a well-noted point there. What about from you, Lee and Gwen?
I think for me, I think professional practice prepared me personally well to like find a job and to get into an agency setting. But I think for me, the biggest thing to like adapt to was the actual like life of a project and how fast things actually move. Because like for me, like being 100% transparent, when I was first brought on, like the next day I was thrown into a branding project, and they're like, cool, like you're gonna create branding. We need a full presentation tomorrow. And I was like, okay, cool, great. Yep, love it. And it was immediate like panic. You're like, oh my God, like when we did this in corporate one, like we had like 8 months to do this. Now I have to do like everything I did in corporate one in one day. Like what is going on? And so I think kind of getting used to those timelines and like, I guess explaining like what might actually happen depending in an agent setting and in-house setting, kind of like different milestones. Like now, every agency has their own process. So depending on the agency, timelines might vary. But I think for us, like how it works, we'll have a briefing and we'll have a kickoff. And then from there, it's around a 2-week turnaround until we present back to client. But within those 2-week turnaround, it's then you have your creative review, which you'll have with the creative director. You'll have a couple of those, and then I'll go into eternal review with the project managers and the account person. And then after that, you'll have, because we're in the digital world, we'll have like a plan to sale where we'll lock in the deck and be like, this is what's happening in the deck and everything's good. And then it'll actually go to presentation. And so just learning that process of what a project goes through in an agency setting compared to what the project life is at school, I think that was the biggest learning thing for me and the biggest curveball for sure.
That makes sense. Yeah, that timeline, the timeline change is different, right? You have lots of time to go back, think about what you put into your project. But when you're, responding to 5 different people on your team about something they needed yesterday, it's a bit of a different, it's a little bit more nerve-wracking. What about on your end, Gwen?
Yeah, I would definitely echo what both Remy and Lee said, but to touch on the speed of delivery was definitely something that, and it's like it's talked about in school. Like we know, like, oh, you get out there and then things are going to be expected sooner. Like it's not like it wasn't known, but the reality of doing it is definitely always a bit of a shock. And so, with school projects, we used to be able to, take as much time. If you were someone who started your project early and you were ahead of the game, you could take hours on hours, every single artboard, every single item is labeled, and everything is so perfect to the T. And then when you're on such a strict timeline, in reality, priorities have to be really accounted for. And what can I cut corners on, that's not going to like jeopardize the project, but how can I personally cut corners in my practice in order to get something, like meet the deadline, right? So there's just like a lot of like, I think the ideals of how a project would be done start to finish is not how it's done in reality, at least, in practice in my role. So thinking that I'm going to literally start every single project at the beginning of the design process and just slowly see it through step by step until I hit the end is not the reality. So sometimes you're jumping in on the 3rd step, sometimes you're jumping in on the 4th, sometimes you're taking, like the 8th step and going back to the 1st. Like it has to be so dynamic and quick paced that I think that was something that was definitely like a big learning curve. And just one other small thing that I guess that I'll throw in general is something that I was thinking about when I first started was when you walk into, well, I physically walked in, but when you click on a link and join your team, sometimes, you're walking into a room thinking all these people are experts at this. They've been doing this for a lot longer than me. This is day one, and sometimes I had the idea a little bit at the beginning of like, oh, I didn't really speak up or ask as many questions in the beginning of certain things because I felt like, okay, well, I'll see how they do it because they, I need to follow their process, right? Like I'm now part of their company, which is true for sure. But I think in some ways, at least I've noticed this now with like our new hire, I actually value their perspective almost more because they are fresh eyes on something.
Right.
And I think it's a disservice for anyone starting new at a place to think that their opinion like doesn't matter as much just because they're new. So if I like could go back and tell myself something, it would have been like, you know, speak up and say like, hey, what about this instead, a little bit sooner, because those like opinions I find are actually like really, really valuable, especially when you're working on a product. You've been staring at it for, you know, years potentially or months on end. Fresh eyes are often the most valuable eyes on what you're working on.
Yeah, that's a really, really good point. And I think, you know, often in life, not just in our work, but in, you know, relationships and in school, we start to sort of think in this idea of like, well, this is how it's always been done, right? And it doesn't mean that it's a permanent staple. Absolutely. I think, you know, we need to empower more students, more faculty, you know, more employers to sort of give people an opportunity to weigh in and have a platform to talk about what do you think about this process. So I think that that's a really nice introspection point. We have a question from Ava, who's asking, for international students, school was how we made friends and connections. Are you guys still in touch with other alumni and faculty?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. Yes.
Lee
Yes.
and I are still in touch. Yes, we've had like some friends and I, we've had some hangouts over virtual hangouts since we graduated. We still text, we still keep in touch. I found it more that this is more true with the people that I was seeing every day and working with every day, like the close group of friends, more than the like everybody at class.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, I think on the point of faculty, I mean, something that I really enjoyed was getting to know the faculty at George Brown and forming connections with them as well. So there are a couple of faculty members that I'm still in contact with, and if I'm going through an issue or if I need some advice, I'll still reach out and be like, what do you think about this? Or just bounce ideas off of them as well, once you form that bond and that connection with them too. So I think it's just, again, it's that networking and creating and keeping those connections with people, both faculty and with your fellow alumni as well.
That's great, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And I guess maybe that's like a poke to people to like turn on your cameras and like create a connection with your teacher, because like you never know that it's useful connections to have on many levels, personal and professional. And yeah, like, I mean, Lee knows, I've FaceTimed him in the middle of a work day. I mean, the benefits of working from home, I can FaceTime Lee in the middle of a work day if I need just a totally random, you know, opinion on something design related. Yeah. And I can be like, what do you think about this? Like, I need some help, right? So like staying connected with, you know, yeah, your good friends from school and classmates, it benefits in many ways. And I just think it's always going to be useful to have connections with people who are in the exact same role as you, the exact same industry. Like, you know, sometimes other friends who don't know anything about the design world, just, you can't rant in the same way to them, you know, like it's useful to keep those ties.
Yeah,
I think that's a great point. And sorry. Just to add to that, also staying in touch with the people you went to school with is helpful when you're going through the job hunt, because you're all going through it together. And it helps to see that other people are going through the same thing. It keeps you going. And it helps when you see how it's working for them, ask them for advice from their experience. They tell you what works, what doesn't work from their point of view. So it's always good to go through that process together so you don't feel alone.
Yeah, and then one thing that stuck with me that Diane said when I was in her class is that the people that are in this room are going to be your it's the, you end up working with them one day. So it's having those friends and those connections, again, you can network with them, but they're also that support system that you can lean on because you're going through that same thing, just like Remy said. But just being nice and, again, being kind to everybody, especially during this difficult time, is great, and making sure that everybody is good and helping everybody out. It's important.
I think it's a really good point, and that support base is really important and has been more important, I would say, over the last year. I just want to echo what everyone has said. Stay connected. You know, email your professors a year after you've graduated to check in, see how they're doing. It's not a bad idea. I've been a reference check for lots of people in the last year. I've been able to talk about the great work lots of students have done at the college. I'm always happy to do it. I know your professors are always happy to do it. So good idea to turn the camera on, or good idea to just stay connected and say, hey, Nicole, I graduated 6 months ago. Here's what I've been up to. Just a good way for us to also, like, we also want to hear from you. We want to know what you've been up to. There's a lot of strength in being able to tell really strong alumni stories. So that's something that we're definitely interested in. For my last question, I'm going to pivot to something that is a little bit more focused. The amount of times I have said this year, a good thesis is a finished thesis, is like, I can't count it how many times I've said it. For all of you that have worked on a major capstone or a thesis project, I know that you went through the trials and tribulations of having a full year to sort of digest this thing, wanting to make it perfect. I know you've got it in your portfolios, you probably talked about it on your job interviews, etc. What advice can you give to students that are sort of looking at the year-end show as an opportunity to showcase their thesis and potentially get hired, or to position their thesis as an independent project that they've done to a prospective employer?
I think that for me, at least, my thesis was the biggest project in my portfolio when I graduated. And I think that's probably the case for a lot of people who are graduating. And it was the main focus of my portfolio. Every time I would do a job interview, it was always the most impressive one, because how long it took me to get that project done, and I know it by heart, and I've done all the research, so I could talk to it very well, and I can explain all my decision making. It's a very fleshed out project, so I was ready for any question. It really showed a lot of things that I can do because it's a bigger project, and I found that that was something that people in job interviews respond to very well when they see the thinking behind your project. So I would say thesis is a really good project when you finish it to make sure it looks good. You know everything behind the process, so you can talk to it very well in your job interviews.
Yeah, I think echoing off of Remy, my project as well was the most fleshed out in my book as well. But I think that also, if you're not completely happy with your thesis, at least it's done. That's the most important thing, but you can always fix it up later, because it can always evolve, which is great. But I think building off of Remy's point, for me, it's also the project that I can talk to the most as well. But it's also the project that I can explain and create the strongest narrative about. And I think that's also something that interviewers look to as well, is that you're able to tell a story and you're able to tell a narrative. Because presentation skills are super important, especially in this digital world. And being able to sell or tell a story about your design to captivate people is something that is really important. And it's a really good practice to do with a capstone or thesis project, because it's something that you've been encapsulated in for so long. So you should know a lot about it. So it's a really good project to practice that with, to talk about every single decision you made, but also the story behind it and why it's important and why people should care about it as well.
That's great. Anything on that from you, Gwen?
Yeah, obviously in interaction design, our final project was very different than graphic design. But I guess maybe I'll take the angle of I recently was a part of some design interviews. We were interviewing for designers, so I can speak to maybe what was standing out in those. In this realm, I think that the most important thing is kind of like Leah said, if you're not that happy with your final project or whatever, I think the most important things that we were kind of looking for was technical skills, which I think, most people coming out of George Brown College, you have the technical skills. And no matter how you're showcasing that is not, at least for maybe, the job that I'm in might be a little bit different, obviously, if you're going to a design agency like, Leah Remy, but, as long as your technical skills are displayed in some way, it will be obvious. There's a big difference between you look at a portfolio, one versus the other, where the technical skills are strong and the one where they're not. That's going to be pretty obvious. I think what Lee's saying is important. It's how you talk about your design and the communication of your design really just communication skills in general really is what comes across and ends up being highly important. So as long as, you know, whether it's your thesis or not, and the big project that you're talking about, as long as you're able to talk about it in a good way, because I know, like, you know, it's one thing to be able to sit down and do the designing, especially now working virtually. The most important thing is being able to communicate that well across different, you know, with this kind of barrier. So yeah, I think like the technical skills will be there, but the communication of it definitely is very important.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think this was super helpful. I think that you've all added a lot of food for thought, especially for young graduates and those that are thinking about graduating, those that are in second year, looking at the landscape. I want to thank all of you for rejoining us. It was nice to see you all again. I know it hasn't been that long, but it does feel like a really long time since you've graduated. So I am going to bring everybody back and we're going to do one last question session. Okay, look at this full Brady Bunch here. All right, so for our last trick of the day, we are going to do one thing. I'm going to ask each of you to give a piece of advice to current students, to students that are coming in, to people that are applying to jobs. You get to pick the angle. One piece of advice that you think is really beneficial to think about over the next year. And we don't have to go in this order. If there's someone that wants to go first, in case you have a piece of burning advice you'd like to share, please feel free to take it. Go ahead, Nicole.
Pick up the phone. Phone the people at the companies. Learn to talk on the phone, people. That is my biggest advice for young folks. The phone is not a scary thing. It's the same thing as a conversation. But I've heard again and again from students who graduate, not only did they see the posting, but they picked up the phone and phoned the art director, and it got them in. So be comfortable on the phone.
It's a really good point. And I think yesterday, Sarah DiDomenico in her talk made the point that, you know, reach out to somebody if you're curious about their work, if you want a portfolio review, if you want to go see their studio, when we could do that, just reach out to them. If they don't respond or they say no, you know, you're nothing has changed. You're in the same position that you were at before you asked, right? So it's really no harm in asking. Lee, you had your hand up. You want to go next?
Yeah, I think my piece of advice that I think I've learned over this year as well is to be kind to yourself as well. I mean, we've been talking about like being kind to others, but you also have to be kind to yourself and remember that, I mean, work is work and there's more to life than just work as well. And that it's about balance. And so trying to find that is super important. But the other piece in that is that you are probably going to get a bunch of no's, but all it takes is that one yes, and that there is someone out there that will give you that chance. And you just have to be patient and be kind to yourself about that.
Yeah, I think that one yes is the word of the week. I don't know if you knew this, but yeah, that makes a huge difference. And I think also I've been having a lot of really interesting conversations with designers around how do you define yourself without telling people you're a designer, right? And so I feel like for designers, their careers often define who they are. Same thing for educators. So, you know, I think being a bit more well-rounded, understanding that like you are not your career is also a very important lesson. And for me, I think, you know, that's a huge one. Who wants to go next?
I just want to add to those, sorry.
No, Remy, you talked first, go for it.
I just want to add to those 2 points that Lee and you just mentioned about being kind to yourself and about after graduation, it's a lot of mixed feelings, and you feel like you want to start right away and you want to just get into it and start working, and that could take time. And I've learned that it's okay that it takes time, and that even though it could happen quickly, it could also take, like in my case, it took 6 months, it could take longer, it could take less. That's not a reflection on you. You could be doing everything right. And so don't feel discouraged. It could take time, and that happens to everyone. And, you know, keep it up.
Yeah, that's really, really good advice. Zav, you got your hand up? Oh,
I'm going to tag on because actually I also want to riff off of what Lee just said about being kind to yourself. It's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to fuck up sometimes. Don't waste time beating yourself up when you make a mistake. Instead, try to figure out what you can learn for next time. And that's probably, maybe just generally good advice. And I know you said only one piece of advice, but also turn off the push notifications on your phone. Trust me on this one. You look at your phone plenty. I did this at the beginning of, actually about halfway through the last semester, and it was a game changer for me. I feel so much less stress without having those notifications popping up constantly. And if you're anything like me, you spend enough time on your phone, you're not going to miss anything.
That's good. Zap, go ahead.
Yeah, mine is very highly philosophical and spiritual. It's about learning how to use a different pair of pants than your joggers. Relearn how to dress up, because we're going to get out of this at some point, and we're going to have to get out. So there are other pants than jogging pants.
Today I'm wearing pants with a waistband, which is, here you go, there's some information. But I got up yesterday before we started the kickoff, and Jasmine said to me, "Are you wearing sweatpants and a dress shirt?" And I was like, "Yeah, I am. Yeah, this is my life now. This is like the world that we live in." But I agree. It's good it also, to get dressed and go out and feel different than in your home clothes. It definitely adds another layer of feeling for sure. Yes, you want to go?
Yeah, I wanted to add on everyone else's as well, being kind to yourself. And you have to consider that everything is a process. And if you go forward and it doesn't work out, you can always come back and try another way. And all this time, you're still learning, and you can push yourself in a different way. So I think it's okay. You don't need to be too hard on yourself. You're doing, like, everyone's doing great, and we're dealing with the same thing, and we need to be mindful of that.
Yeah, definitely a good point. Christine.
I think that, a lot of the advice I would give is probably similar to what everyone has said. So just sort of picking up on some of that is, I think, to also manage expectations and just realize that it's very unlikely you will land your dream job immediately within a week of graduating. It's a process. And even when you do land that first job, now you have that experience under your belt, and maybe it's a positive one, maybe it's a negative one, but either way, you're going to learn something about yourself, and you can take that forward with you to your next job. And I think that whole process, it's such a weird winding road, but you always end up learning along the way from every single experience, whether it's good or bad. So I think it's just, a matter of just making sure that you set your goals, but just be kind to yourself in the sense that you have to be patient. You have to be persistent, but you also have to be patient, and you have to just keep working towards it. So don't give up.
That's great. Gwen.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point, Christine. There's definitely value in any role. Like, you'll either learn something you love about it, or you'll learn something you hate about it. And either way, it's pushing you towards where you want to be going. So I think that's a really great point. I guess to throw out something potentially a little bit different, I guess I'll say, we talked about this a little bit in general, this whole talk about boundaries, but kind of riffing off of that, it's hard to be, like, we're all in a creative space. It's hard to be creative when we feel like a trash can because of what's going on in the world. So I would say, like, it's very important to really prioritize those boundaries and find pockets of life, hopefully that aren't, related to a screen, that bring you joy and bring you life. Because if you are not feeling that, kind of separate from work, it's hard to log in on the workday and do anything to the capacity that you potentially would want to be doing it. Right? Like, to designing to the level that you would want to be at. It's hard to do that if just, inside you're not feeling that those creative juices flowing. And however that comes for you, I think is, like, worth investing time in. For me, it's doing, a ton of things outside of a screen. Anything from just hanging out with a friend who makes you laugh a lot to, going on a walk in nature, whatever it is, reading a book, whatever. But I think we really have to invest time in those. Yes, you approve. And we really have to invest time in those areas of life, because it's hard for you to be, I think, the best designer you can be when you are feeling just kind of down or, like, lacking joy in the rest of your life.
Yeah, very well noted. I like that most of the answers are like, design less, take care of yourself more. I'm really enjoying this. Saya.
I think one thing I learned is to be open and to be accepting of all the changes that are happening right now and are going to come. And I think, as chaotic as it is, these are opportunities for us to set new norms, whatever we do next. And I think as long as we keep an open mind and we keep being flexible and adaptable, things will turn out okay. And I think for me, speaking to how I was almost withdrawn from this program right now, I am so glad that I am in this program. And I think this is such a valuable way for me to spend my pandemic isolation time. And I think if I had said no, my life would have been, I don't know where it would have been. But I think, yeah, being open and then being grateful for whatever is coming our way.
That's great. I'm going to add something here that's not really about design, but it could be about design. For me, that I've been kind of really thinking a lot about this idea of like normalizing changing my mind. And so I'm a very passionate person. I have very strong opinions and ideas about things. For those of you that don't know me, you might need that piece of information. But I think it's really good when you look at something that you feel strongly about, you start to see it from other people's perspectives. I'm noticing that there's more and more conflict in the world. And I think it's okay to have different opinions as long as you're respectful of each other's opinions and you allow each other the space to share those opinions. So I'm really trying to normalize understanding that someone else's perspective and opinion might not be mine, but it's important to share this space to have those conversations. And I think that if we want a better world, we have to make it. And a lot of the ways that we can do that is through communication and through understanding. I want to thank everybody for joining us for today's panel. This has been, I think, really informative, really positive, and generally a really nice way to spend my Tuesday morning. I hope that everyone else enjoyed it as well. I want to do a quick shout out and promo for the yes.schoolofdesign.ca website. We have a ton of graduate profiles on there, as well as a full event schedule. If you are following us, if you're not following us yet on Instagram, please do. Feel free to tag us on the events of this week. Quick update on what's coming up next. At 1 p.m., we have a speaker session with Mo Bofil, who's going to talk about the work she's created over the last year in the pandemic. Super inspiring stuff. At 2 p.m., we have a session with Stussy Shuden, who's going to talk about the art of the pitch and how you can better prepare yourself to pitch your ideas and projects. And at 3 p.m. today, this afternoon, we've got a talk with graphic design legend and goddess Ellen Lupton. So I hope that you will join us for that as well. Thank you to everyone for the audience questions. Thank you to the faculty and the students and the alumni for joining us. It's nice to have everyone in the same virtual space. And I look forward to connecting with you all soon. And that's it for me. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Take care.